Hey guys, it's Cole, and so the Diablo 4 team just did a development update stream, and so I'm doing my condensed summary of what they went through here just like I do for Final Fantasy 14. So first up is there is another Diablo 4 beta before the release in June, going from May 12th to May 14th, and this is what they are calling a server slam. To all of us, this means, hey, I get to play this game more, which is super exciting, and this is going to include all the changes and learnings that they brought up during this discussion, as well as accurate legendary drop rates. So the numbers from that is going to be incredibly interesting to look at. This weekend is also going to give you the chance to earn a trophy that you can put on your mount called Ashava's Horn if you defeat Ashava with a level 20 character during this beta. She's going to be spawning roughly every 3 hours during the second day, so after the first 24 hours she's going to be every 3 hours. With that being said, let's get into the talk. They opened up the stream by discussing world tiers and difficulty. Once you reach level 50 and finish the base game campaign, you can then get your first additional world tier 3 called Nightmare tier. To unlock that, you need to complete what is called an end cap dungeon. End cap dungeons are longer, stronger dungeons with boss encounters kind of laced throughout it that act as milestones for players to gain access to a strong world tier. Or I kind of think of it as like a test of your skill. I might be doomed. Things like learning boss mechanics, fine-tuning builds, and the rest will matter to defeat these capstone dungeons. Now, why you want to care about these world tiers is that the game's difficulty and progression is fundamentally tied to world tiers. You're getting harder content, better loot, and actually unique content. Unique content includes things like Nightmare tier is going to give you Helltide Events, Nightmare dungeons, as well as on tier 3, that Nightmare tier, you get the chance to get sacred items dropping. They also talk about ancestral items, which are going to be dropping from tier 4, the Torment tier. What they discussed here was very important. With the more difficult tiers, the difficulty being bumped up is more than just numbers, which is really boring to everyone. They're gonna have, of course, like some more generic damage and health, but the world was designed to be more hostile in general, like enemy groupings, enemies being more hostile, moving faster, cooldowns between the mob special attacks, projectiles can now hone in, they brought up, and I'm like, oh shoot, and the enemies now group up in different ways and attack in different strategies. At this point of the stream, they did note that the higher the level of enemies, the greater the chance that they drop good items such as sacred items. Let's talk about sacred items for a second here. The world tier 3 and above has a chance to drop sacred items. When they drop, they are going to drop in a large power range such as level 50 all the way to level 70, so it is allowing you to get a pretty exciting drop even at lower levels, and some of these effects are very impactful to your build. Legendary items we're very acquainted with from the beta, and certain special effects are available on items called legendary items. You can extract the power from legendary items and place it on another item. We already saw these systems during the beta quite in excess with the Occultist. I spent a lot of time at the Occultist, and once you go to world tier 3 and 4, even more legendary powers have been said to be available, which is very exciting to me. Now, unique items take this a few steps further, and these are going to be much rarer chase items, very powerful items which can be very much build defining, like stay in werewolf form forever, which is absolutely badass. So I'm kind of viewing these as like legendaries, but like more powerful legendaries, or like legendaries on steroids. Let's talk about some of the game modes that they discussed during the stream. The first one we're going to talk about is the Helltides, and the Helltides are going to be a game mode that unlocks once you get into Nightmare tier. These exist in a fixed location that you can kind of see, at least from the screenshot they showed during the stream, that it's like in the minimap location, and so you will be able to locate them, and these are going to rotate over time to different locations. In the Helltide, you get a variety of different events, difficult monsters and such to deal with, but what you're also going to be getting here is a currency called Cinders. This is going to be a player currency that you can collect in the Helltide, and you take these cinders as you look through it for Helltide caches. Every cache in a Helltide zone is very specific to a particular item slot, such as if you wanted an amulet or helmet or ring, you can particularly focus on getting an amulet, helmet, or ring cache. Adding on an additional layer of high risk of high reward is that you do drop cinders once you die or leave the Helltide zone, so the further you try and overextend in a Helltide zone, the riskier it is, and so you can get legendaries and other items to drop normally, of course, though. So it's like, if you get a few legendaries to drop in the Helltide zone and you like wipe in it, you're going to lose your cinders, but you're still going to get your drops. During the stream, they did note that you can farm special crafting items for higher tier weapon and item upgrades in the Helltides as well. So Helltide, what I got from it, overall, target farming specific drops, crafting materials, grinding mobs for loot. Sounds honestly really good. The second content type that they talked about during the stream was Nightmare Dungeons, and these are going to be a key part of the endgame and replayability loop is what they said, and these can go up to level 150, which is obviously way above the level 100 cap. I'm kind of thinking in terms of like World of Warcraft, like pushing keys almost. And so what you get through the content is nightmare sigils that open portals in a nearby side dungeon. There's going to be a subset of dungeons that can be turned into nightmare dungeon, so you may be familiar with the normal version of a dungeon, but the nightmare mode can give different afflictions that will change the dungeon, such as you might have spawn portals that bring out a ton more monsters, or a nightmare cyst that is like an enrage timer, or at least how they described it sounds like an enrage timer to me, that grows in size and does devastating damage to the point that you either need to run away and give it a wide berth as it explodes, or perish. More afflictions are going to be added with higher item level sigils and then stronger monster power. Now if you get an affliction that you don't want on the nightmare sigil, like an affliction that you really don't want, you can break them down at roughly a 4:1 ratio for an affliction that you do want at the occultist located in the main cities. So if you get something you really don't want to deal with, you can just junk it and do something. It's kind of reminding me of Hearthstone's dust system with that ratio, honestly. Rewards from Nightmare Dungeons include Paragon glyph upgrades, which is going to be very important. We're going to talk about that in a second. Nightmare Dungeons are going to be a great way as well to farm those ancestral and sacred items. Reaching the end of one of these Nightmare Dungeons, once you have a glyph that you obtain from the level 1 to 50 experience, these glyphs can go into the Paragon board and are going to be extremely powerful effects. This is when you really want to level up that effect on that particular glyph. Developers did say that sigils are initially earned from completing Whispers of the Dead from the overworld content stream. Didn't really go into too many details about Whispers of the Dead, but from what I've understood from other content that has been told from the devs is that this is like kind of daily quest stuff. I might be oversimplifying it, I'm sorry. Now let's talk about Paragon Boards, which can be thought about as theme boards focused on a particular aspect of a character, such as a pure summoner, necromancer Paragon board. You can have a total of 220 Paragon board points by the time that you max your character, which lets you really tailor your character out to the way that you want to play. It is possible to respec with gold, although that's going to be a high point of contention with the community, so I'm moving on. So there's going to be 5 types of nodes. There's going to be normal nodes, magic nodes, rare nodes, legendary, and lastly glyphs. So normal nodes basically seem to be like filler stats. Magic nodes are going to give you different affixes that you can collect over time that slightly augment builds. Rare nodes are going to be much more powerful off the bat, but also potentially have a bonus effect. So if you can meet certain thresholds, these nodes become even more powerful and stayed to be some of the most critical pieces in the board. Not in your best interest to just collect rare nodes, you also want to unlock those bonus effects. So bonus effects, they did also mention, have higher thresholds for the further boards that you're unlocking. So like say you're on your 5th board and your first board requires say like 200 dexterity, the 5th board for a similar node might require like 400 or something. Legendary nodes are kind of like rare nodes, but even better, and they are going to be like build defining. Then glyphs, which is what we just spoke about with the Nightmare Dungeons, they are going to be able to be upgraded during those Nightmare Dungeons, and they are going to be like the most powerful part of your board. Continue to grow the radius of the affected nodes for the glyph. As you like elevate in tiers, players can also rotate boards and choose which gate that they enter into. I tried to like highlight in the screenshot from the stream like where a gate is, and so you can like rotate the boards. So these glyphs can be massively, majorly impactful. Now they did a section on specifically the beta learnings, and they started off immediately by talking about class balance. They brought up that they used a combination of player feedback plus the data that they track in the game, like classes wiping to particular bosses, to inform their decisions, giving a solid 2-pronged approach using data. So in general, they identified melee classes are feeling weaker, so they got looked at. Companions were buffed significantly, which as someone looking to do a companion druid at release, that is huge. The devs did specify that there are changes beyond what is seen in this slide, such as legendary power specifics and lots of small details and tuning. About the necromancer nerfs, they did specify that they wanted the necromancer to have more of an economy around summoning and defeated enemy usage. They did evaluate bosses that did wipe minions, which would also include the druid, such as like boss did a huge AoE, so they did modify the druid and necromancer minions damage taken from that kind of AoE, as they said that it's just not interesting to majorly micromanage minions and just see them all get wiped to boss. So they did look into that, which I'm very glad about. Now during this section about balance, they did specify that they did a permanent storm werewolf druid build. I gotta try that, which They said at endgame with the full kit, full build put together felt amazing, so the beta low level wasn't really indicative of how things are at the endgame, and so as someone who is super hyped about Druid and Werewolves, that makes me super happy. Now about dungeon feedback, they showed a specific dungeon design to indicate a major problem raised during beta, that there is too much running around at the objectives are really placed at the dead ends, and that a player will potentially need to cycle right back to the start of the dungeon, which sucks. I did that myself. So they moved the objectives around to be a lot more directly in the way of where you're going to naturally path around, so there's going to be significantly less backtracking. They're not really sticking those objectives in the far corners off there with the unhappy faces. Other changes are that dungeons used to require you to clear an entire dungeon of all enemies, which I can say was super annoying in beta. So what has changed, for example, is now enemies will come chasing after you once you reach a certain threshold, rather than you need to run around. We're collecting anima motes to unlock doors. They said that these anima motes, when you collect them, will give you a host of buffs and resources. Now they brought up some other smaller details, like they changed the fonts, they removed the reset button for the dungeons, but resetting dungeons is still a mechanic in the game, so not to worry about that. World boss is the first time you defeat it, you're going to get more loot. You can defeat it multiple times for some loot, but the first time the week is going to be the largest by far. Ultra wide screens they mentioned, and then they didn't really seem to mention more. I'm hoping that the UI can be tailored. That said, that's going to do the conclusion for this. I'm going to do a separate video on the QA because this is already 11 minutes long, and oh god, a lot of information. I'm excited.